and welcome to Sound Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. In this episode, we journey into the world of sound, creativity, and craftsmanship with instrument maker Richard Cooke, the visionary behind Freenotes, the instruments that invite anyone, anywhere, to make harmonious music. Richard's path has taken him from exploring music to designing instruments that dissolve barriers between people and sound. We explore his philosophy of accessibility and beauty, the evolution of his work from concert halls to parks and healing spaces, and how his instruments are finding new life in sound baths, sound healing, and community settings around the world. Through his story, we're reminded that music isn't just for musicians. It's a universal language that connects, uplifts, and transforms. Please enjoy this episode with Richard Cooke. Welcome, Richard. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure, Natalie. Thank you for your work and your interest in sound and my part in the whole parade.
Right? Yeah, just so people can be familiar with you for any of the listeners that aren't, can you just share a bit? I know this is a big question, a little bit about your musical beginnings and those key influences that shaped your path from perhaps musician, performer to instrument maker.
Well, I am not a religious or even particularly spiritual person, aside from my fascination with music and the communication ability that affords to us on an emotional level. But I started out in the church choir, and I actually sang in choirs for over 15 years. And the music that the church harvested for their particular uses is really great music, a lot of Bach and really fine composers. And so I learned about singing in harmony, which is just such a great way to start. The voice is really the primal instrument. And then I did have some piano lessons. I was never a great student. I was never great on the trumpet and the marching band, but I liked walking and honking at the same time. That was fun. And and then I put it all away, and a friend put me in front of a flute at one point in my freshman year of college, and so I decided not to read any music or take any lessons. I would just let the flute teach me how to play it. And and I was no good, but I walked around just like with my trumpet. I walked around and played the flute, and a couple of years I actually did get good. And so the improv on the flute, it so surprised me as how much pleasure it was playing something that just came from inside you, from inspiration. So that's how I got into the conviction that making your own music was a way for people to get in touch with their undiscovered self. And that's really why I ever started building musical instruments. I was adopted into the Paul Winter Consort, and we did workshops and we built a music camp for adults. And I started putting instruments out in the woods, huge chimes, a xylophone footbridge over a creek, and then these metallic bar instruments. And the first time I heard a sound like that from my workshop putting a bar over a well-tuned resonator, I jumped around Paul Winter's garage, and I said out loud, "The world needs this sound." And I never imagined me being a professional instrument maker or any kind of professional at all. So it was quite a surprise years later when I needed to make some money because I had a son, and you know how that is. Um, I uh, I couldn't think of anything else to do except build musical instruments. So that's how I came from performer to instrument builder, just out of necessity.
Yeah.
Make any money as being a performer, and I made enough money to pay the bills as a builder of instruments.
I love that it kind of came from your just kind of intuitive, improvisatory nature as learning musical instruments. And so that kind of makes me think of what I've read about some of your work is that um, kind of removing barriers so that anyone can make beautiful music. And I know that's influenced how you've made the instruments that you do, that there's no wrong notes. So maybe can you talk a little bit more about how that guides your work?
Well, certainly no wrong notes is something that most cultures around the world actually embrace, and the predominance of the pentatonic scale, even the diatonic scale, within musical cultures is very significant. What we have in the orchestral tradition of Western Europe is the chromatic scale with all the black notes of the piano and the white notes of the piano, the black notes being a pentatonic scale for whatever value that is. So you can sit down at the piano and play the black notes and never get any what is called dissonance, like a sound that doesn't sound harmonious. And so I make most of my instruments to get where people already are, which is having no knowledge of instruments, but they can recognize sounds they don't like. So I throw out all of the notes that might be dissonant to untrained ears, and therefore people have total freedom to just play. And these mallets are really magical too because they you just grab them. You don't have to manipulate fingers like a piano or a flute. You just grab them and tap on things, and they just are so easy to make a section of sounds together that are music. Really, all music is notes strung together, and we can fancy it up any way we want. But if you are someone who's never played music before and you get to just do anything and it sounds good, you become happy. I mean, that's the most universal response to these kinds of instruments that I put, especially in parks. But we make instruments for home studios and sound healing ceremonies as well. But the park instruments are really the ones that go out and embrace the most people because no one needs to own them. They don't need to take care of them. They just live out in the park, and you walk up to them and play them. And if there's enough of the instruments around, then you get to decide which ones you like best and play with other people. And that's when the magic really happens, when we can play with other people and achieve a telepathic state of the music actually playing us. So that's why I build these instruments with no wrong notes, is so that you
Yeah.
can right into the deep end of the pool and you're just floating around in sound. It's
That's
really
beautiful. Yeah, there's such a freedom to that. Me personally, coming from a classically trained background, right? That's great that I learned the technique, but there was a bit of a constriction to it, a perfectionism. So that entry point of music is just being enjoyable and it sounds good no matter what you do. I mean, that's being playful, and I think that's really a wonderful place to have started and to have brought to other people. So maybe just talk a little bit about the evolution of Freenotes, right? And the harmony parks to then what it is now and maybe your main focus is now.
Well, this has all been a magical journey, and I don't want to go into all of the twists and turns of it, but it's I've been pushed and prodded by divine influences this whole way. It wasn't my idea to do much of any of this, really, although I loved playing the flute and I love sound. This music camp started an evolution where I realized how much people liked playing instruments out in the forest, out in nature. And so I started, though, building simple instruments for people to play because of the workshops that Paul and I presented. And people were having trouble with their chromatic instruments, trouble with the freedom of hearing and responding quickly. And so Paul and I came up with a plan to build percussion instruments and pentatonic scales that would be in different pitch ranges, so soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And we made those, and Jim Doble was there right at our very first music camp, and he brought one of his instruments. And so Jim and I basically started at the same time. And I'm so glad to see that he is doing these beautiful outdoor instruments as well for parks and such. And there's a few of us out there that are building things that can stand up to the weather and hard use. And so I started with indoor instruments to make workshop improvisation easy for people and satisfying. And then I was commanded by a voice in my head to sit at a table that I was getting up from in a convenience store in Moab, Utah. The voice just said, "Don't move." And I had to go, open up my little workshop and get it started. And then 10 minutes later, I kind of gave up on sitting there. And the voice came back when I tried to get up and said, "Don't move, just stay." And what happened in about 5 or 10 minutes after that is this whole meeting started at the table, which was about expanding the park. And there was a little blue line on the blueprints. And I said, "What is that blue line?" And they said, "It's a little water feature we're putting in the park." And I said, "Well, if you're going to put a stream in the park, you need to have a xylophone footbridge over it." And the city planner called me back in a couple of days and said, "Was that serious?" And I said, "Yeah, I've built them before." So that's how it all started. And it's been just one miracle after another, because I don't know anything about running businesses, and I don't know much about, never did at the beginning know anything about acoustics or instrument design. And I learned a lot of that from Paul Winter, but then I fell in with a composer, a well-known American composer, Lou Harrison, who introduced me to gamelan music, which is the form of music that's indigenous to Bali and Java particularly. And these are orchestras of instruments where everyone plays a simple part. And so you have a lot of amateur musicians. There aren't so much professional musicians there. Everyone can play this music. And it's very intricate music. And I built 4 gamelan ensembles for Lou Harrison and learned an enormous amount about tuning chimes and scales that are not tempered. So just intonation, mathematical scales other than those we use on the piano tuning that have a little bit more perfect harmony. And so some of the instruments I build use just intervals, such as this one, the wave. That's a perfect fifth. It's not a tempered fifth like we use on the piano, which has 1 beat per second. this is a mathematical interval with two vibrations of the lower note fitting exactly into three vibrations of the upper note. And I won't go into any more acoustical jargon than that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm sure you're continuing, at least from what I can tell, having all kinds of opportunities and projects. Like you said, just the path has kind of opened up for you, and the opportunities, it never probably cease to amaze you. I kind of wonder if there's anything that comes to mind with this work, how it's developed a really meaningful moment. Maybe there's a memory or two that you've witnessed when people engage with your instruments.
Especially in the park, it's wonderful to watch because I just get to go out there with my tool belt on and adjust some things. And no one thinks of me as anything other than the maintenance person, which is great. So I get to watch people without them watching me, in a sense. And there's two things: either they're very active and tend to laugh a lot, or they get very reflective and attentive and try to figure out what it is that they can do that they want to repeat, because music is just about making a pattern and then repeating it and then changing it a little bit and then coming back to it. And so I like to make it so that people are emboldened to be freely expressive by not laying everything out linearly, like instruments like this, where uh, the instrument is jumbled up, where notes cannot be predicted, so that no one has to feel that there's any particular right way of playing them. And with these bells in the back, they're they're on different rows, so you can't really. Your mind has to shut off, and you get led by your ears and your body. The ergonomics of playing the instrument winds up being more in your mind can't predict what sort of notes you're going to get out of it. So there's those two reactions of both laughter and running around to see which sounds are the most appealing to you, and then the intentiveness of trying to figure out what it is that can make a little series of notes. It's fascinating for me to watch people do that.
I discovered you through a shop that carries your instruments in Florida. They had the wing, the waves, and I think some bass notes too. And it's a sound healing shop. So I'm kind of curious, and I use the wave in sound healing and sound baths. Your instruments are being used more and more for sound healing and sound bath settings. So I'm just kind of curious how you're seeing that progress and how maybe that's changing your approach as well, how those instruments are now getting used.
Well, it all goes back to that first bar and resonator. Any sound that's extremely beautiful, and most of my instruments are resonated, although the larger plate ones like the wave don't have to be, and these bells don't have to be resonated because they have so much surface area. They can be audible over a large distance without resonators. But these have a tuned air column, and that creates a dimensionality to the sound that is really extraordinary. But any particular sound, whether it's a bell, whether it's a vibrating plate, these things have an emotional and neurological effect on us. So while I build instruments to allow people to play music, a series of tones, and the motto of my business is simply beautiful music made simple. And so it's simple to make beautiful music. Any tone has an ability to be a catalyst for something in your undiscovered self. And I think that's the power of sound healing, and a lot of it is it relaxes people to where their mind stops trying to analyze what's happening. And and that's a beautiful place to go. Our minds are so process oriented, and what do we have to do next? And what am I going to do after this? And so to get a position that's catalyzed by gongs or bells or all sorts of, drum instruments that are used, voices, to where you can relax and simply receive. Now that's where the audience is just receiving. Improvisational music, where you get four people playing together, is sound healing of a slightly different type. And you can do that with the waves. You can do it with simple instruments that just create one sound, so that the composite sound of everyone playing is what is music. So you've got to start from a beautiful sound, whatever that is. And then you can, if you're a sound healer, you can pattern it any way you want in order to achieve a relaxing state to where people can enter into a relationship with that sound, and the relationship of what they desire for relaxation or creative expression. My own interest in music is not just musical, it's about stimulating people to be creative in whatever else they want to do. So once you can play satisfying sounds of a musical character for yourself, you can, by extrapolation, do anything else that's seemingly difficult. We have so made music the province of specialists who train for years. And I like to simplify it so that not only can people play music, but they can think anything else that's complex can be broken down into simpler components. This is especially good for students. And so we put a lot of instruments in the schoolyards. And I can forget what the entire question was, but sound healing and music originate from the same love of tone.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that what I like about it, sound healing and the use of these instruments and your work is about simplicity, right? And like less is more and how important that is in our times. You know, it really is.
Beautiful music made simple. And
Exactly.
you're absolutely right. Simplicity brings us home to that place when we were children, where we somehow felt complete, even though we didn't understand much of what was going on in the world. And by analyzing and specializing and breaking things down into intelligible units, we lose that holistic
Yeah.
understanding of our relationship to nature, and everything that's undiscovered is already part of us. And so children understand that. And to a certain extent, these sound catalysts take us back there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well said. You know, with all that you've created, what feels the most important in your work right now? What are you really curious about or passionate about right now?
Well, this is the most difficult thing I've ever done, is creating these bells. And so I've had to invent a number of different things to allow me to tune bells. These bells are made in a factory for architectural accoutrements. And I've used the bells in outdoor instruments for many years, but I've never been able to tune them, because holding anything that's round so that a power tool can work on it is really a difficult thing to do. And it's a little bit dangerous too, even when you are experimenting with ways to do it. Things don't always work out in the workshop with high speed. So at any rate, this has been a more difficult thing. I'm inventing slit bells, which are large tubes with a tuning fork in a sense at one end, and then a resonating chamber at the other. So they're hollow, but they have an interaction that creates resonance. And there's a rope going right through the middle of them with a ball at the bottom of the tuning fork sections. And players, children mostly, can grab the rope and shake it, and the bells ring, these slit bells, these tubular bells. And so we're making these instruments to be included on those large play structures that kids climb on, and they'll be able to stand and shake these bell ropes just like children in the Middle Ages were pulling on ropes to ring the bells up in the tower. And bells are fascinating instruments that have existed since the Bronze Age. Some of the oldest metal instruments were bells, and they kind of got conscripted into church steeples and fire alarms and school bells that we've all heard, and telephone bells. We got tired of all that stuff. And so bells as musical instruments haven't really existed for a while. And so one of the fascinating things for me is to try to take these sounds and make them available in a musical context, because they are so beautifully dimensionalized, is what I use the word to describe the kind of waver that these instruments, these bells have. And we've made a couple of different beautiful instruments for outdoor parks that are out there. One of them looks like a caterpillar. The bells are the spots on the caterpillar's back, and they're very cute and they sound great and they hold up to the outdoors, and they never go out of tune. But making them for indoor use requires a much more exacting tuning system, because you really want perfect harmony. And so I've been working on these bells for 2 years. It took 3 years to do the waves and make them just the way I wanted them to be, so that there's a sound sustained and decayed evenly across both of the high and the low notes. There's so many unanalyzable parts to what I do that the physics may be there, but it's not in a language I can understand. And so I experiment empirically with this, and I work on the sound until I get it just where I want it. But every instrument that I've made has been preceded by about 50 failures. And you just get used to that. And I'm so grateful that once we've gotten them figured out, they can be recreated. And we're making thousands of these. It's quite amazing to me. But yes, people want beautiful sound, and they really want to play music because they see how much fun it is for professionals that they see on TV doing this. But it's the haves and the have-nots. The people who are watching don't really get that experience. And so my work is about spreading the love.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful to hear about your process. That's what I've noticed about your instruments is the sustain, right? Obviously, it's beautiful notes when struck, but the sustain is just, there's a magic there.
It's the magic of gentleness, really, because as the sustain diminishes, it models that relaxing state of descending into sleep and dream. And I've had dreams all throughout my life about the joy of playing music, and it's still the thing that I love the most to do with my friends is sit down and play music together. And I want everyone who wants that experience to have it. And historically, we had that. People played music, they sang. And then when the advent of TV and recording studios and producers and now all sorts of electronic enhancements, it's become so specialized that most people never get a chance. They think, well, music is something that other people do. And so
Yeah.
my work has largely been just to say, well, no, everyone can play music. And
Yes. Yeah.
my friend Gary Kavistad of Woodstock Chimes, he opened a store called Anyone Can Whistle, just to show that really, and people are nervous about their voices and singing, but singing, and especially the way that toning is used in these sound healing contexts, is so important because we can reach a part of ourselves by singing that is very difficult to reach any other way. And so
Yeah.
people who make toning available really have a lot of, I have a lot of admiration for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's really been part of your mission to um, help people find sound in their community and daily lives. What's your hope for that? Um, is that kind of return, like you said, people used to have more access to this.
Well, my hope is freedom, Natalie. The freedom to do what you want to do without knowing whether you're going to succeed. And so these are little on ramps into the courage of creativity. And so I put these in parks, but they go all sorts of places, into hospital courtyards, libraries, even the Department of Defense puts them on Army bases, Air Force bases in their children's programs. And they probably don't have any idea that these instruments are about freedom. And but these are about discovering how much we can please ourselves and one another. And so I want that to be something that people take forward in their lives. And I've been doing this now for 40 years, all the way back to the first xylophone footbridge, but 30 years with instruments in parks. So there's children I know who grew up with these instruments, and it's made a difference in their lives. Some of them actually play music, drums, and such like that regularly, that might not have ever done it otherwise. And I have a great respect for the people who teach drum circles and such like as that, because that's a great way of getting into expression with other people. So I'm just another voice in the choir of people breaking out of the tyranny of silence.
Yeah.
Keeping yourself here so you don't make a mistake and don't stand out. I want everyone to make lots of mistakes
Yeah.
and have a good time doing it.
Have fun with it. Yeah. 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 Fantastic. I love that. I mean, gosh, that's what it's all about. We can take things so seriously, and how liberating, like you said, how freeing just to have joy, with the simple things and making music easily. To I guess bring it to a close, is there a question that you wish people would ask you about your work or anything else you want to share?
Well, maybe one all-encompassing question is, how do I do this? And it's not so much about building musical instruments, although I love it when people come to me and ask that sort of thing. But how do I actually do it? And so creating what I wanted to do in the beginning, and of course got so busy with building instruments and paying the bills that never got quite around to it. But we are doing it with the outdoor musical instruments now. We have a couple of great music educators who are doing videos to explain how the instruments work and how you can play with other people by these simple interlocking patterns. I'm very excited about that. And I'm excited about making an accessory system for people to play indoor musical instruments so that they can play with their friends or themselves. And so I'm thinking about doing that in Bali. Bali has a great gamelan tradition, and it also has it's an international destination for people who are seeking transformation. It's a beautiful ceremonial culture, and I have some friends. My son lives in Bali and teaches environmental preservation and coral reef ecology, etc. But I know sound healers that live in Bali, that go through Bali, and that we can create a tribe to actually compare knowledge about how to make this process for someone who wants to get beyond just playing randomly, wants to understand phrasing, wants to understand rhythm and its relationship to melody, and then how to listen to other people and respond immediately. Those are all the techniques you need. And so to find a way that's publishable through video particularly, but also some written explications of that technique. That's what I'd love to do. And so that's what maybe I would like people to ask me is, how do I do this? And I say, well, come and help me figure this out. Because it's simple on the one hand and then vastly complex on the other. And so we can't be daunted by the complexity. We incorporate complexity into the simplicity of music. As I'm sure you know from all your studies, sometimes when the music breaks down, it's transforming into that which it couldn't have gotten to any other way. So you have to go through this period of melodic disruption to where you get into a new synthesis. And that new synthesis lives inside you. That's the great thing, is that when we stop playing music, our psyche is still ringing. It's still in resonance with that. And that's why we have so much to pass on in terms of how to do this to other people.
Oh, beautiful. And so exciting. The mission that you set out on and where it's going, where it's still developing. It's just so wonderful. Right? And what a profound yet simple mission, you know.
It's really amazing. When I was growing up, of course, there were little instruments in the parks, but they didn't sound any good, and they generally were broken, maybe even before they'd been out there very long. And I was so disappointed in all of them. And I just don't like things that break. But you know, nothing's forever. But having the ability to have created a standard for outdoor musical instruments and shown how they can be really concert quality sound. And so now other companies are building musical instruments, quite credible musical instruments, not just my company. So forever forward, I don't see the genie ever going back in the bottle. Music is going to be a part of playgrounds. And so I want it to be a part of every home as well, and a cherished part of our personal experience. So that's what I continue to work on now. Thank
That
you.
is fantastic. It's really fantastic. And thank you for living your mission, right? A beautiful life and beautiful music, uh, out of simplicity. Yeah. And
Happy, joy, kindness, love. It's a big music thing right there. Those.
yeah.
So thank you for being part of the choir, Natalie.
Yes, yes. What a vibrant choir we all are participating in, right? Quite the choir. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I really, really appreciate everything that you've shared, and I hope that the listeners that didn't know about you are excited to see the instruments that you are developing and continue to develop. So thank you so much.
Welcome you are to come, you and your friends and listeners, and check out what we do in Durango, Colorado.
Yeah, thank you.
Down the road.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com, on the YouTube channel, Sounds Heal Studio, for the podcast and new music, on Instagram at Natalie Brown Sounds Heal, and Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.